In 2021, the Flames held a players-only meeting where Captain Mark Giordano would gather the team together and would specifically call out star forward Matthew Tkachuk, telling him to, quote, "stop causing a riot every night." And well, did anyone actually think he was going to stop? Besides, once Giordano left via Seattle and Tkachuk left for Florida, he didn't have to listen to him anymore. He didn't have anyone telling him that he can't. And so, in a game versus brother Brady, he decided to yet again cause a riot.
You're going to get a fight from Brady Tkachuk.
Has 2 minutes for goaltender interference, 2 minutes for roughing. Florida, number 12, has 2 minutes for roughing, and then every player on the ice has a 10-minute misconduct. Florida will have a 2-minute power play.
The scenes of the aftermath of this brawl was something to admire. At one point, Florida's bench looked like your local beer leagues. Both teams would accumulate 157 penalty minutes, and the incident shocked the hockey world. So, because of it, I wanted to look back and see what the most penalized game was in NHL history. And not only was I able to find it, but the game itself would change the rulebook for good. Let's go back to 2004. The teams who played a role in this historic matchup were the Ottawa Senators and who else but the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers have always been known to be a hard-nosed, gritty, physical team, but many also know that this current team struggled against the Sens. The two teams would meet up in the playoffs both in 2002 and 2003, and Ottawa always came out on top, beating Philly in 5 games in 2002 and 6 games in 2003. And in the regular season, the Flyers would be winless versus the Senators in their previous 5 matchups, going 0-2-3. So come late February, the two were set to face off again, and the Flyers were hoping to finally end their losing streak. But what would happen instead would light a fuse that was waiting to ignite. During the third period, as Flyers Mark Recchi and Senators Martin Havlat would enter the defensive zone, Recchi would hook Havlat, causing the two to collide into the boards. And in a fit of rage over both the hook and the penalty not being called, Havlat would grab his stick and slash Recchi, aiming for and hitting his face. This enraged the Flyers bench, but also Havlat, who now had to serve a 5-minute major and a game misconduct call for the swing, as well as a 2-game suspension. On top of all of that, the game would end in a 1-1 tie, but that didn't seem to matter for either side. The two were scheduled to meet up again the following week, and temperatures were rising in Philly. For them, this upcoming game would be all about, as head coach Ken Hitchcock put it, revenge. His post-game interview is iconic, as he further added fuel to the fire, suggesting that the players settle the conflict. Someday, someone's going to make him eat his lunch, he'd say. This is something, in my opinion, that the players should take care of. Recchi would also take shots at Havlat, stating, quote, "It doesn't surprise me coming from this guy. He's that type of player. He's done it before. But he better protect himself." These were clear fighting words by the Flyers, so many anticipated that the following matchup on March 5th could get ugly. Commentators before puck drop would even warn the viewers that this could be a possibility.
Guys, a lot of talk of revenge around these parts in Philadelphia. What do you think we'll see tonight?
Well, you know, Chris, I think both the coaches talked about this, and I think it's likely going to be the case. There's just too much at stake in the standings that you showed for anybody to go out and do something stupid. And now, if this game gets out of hand one way or the other, if Philadelphia or Ottawa gets a big lead, I don't think we can make the same guarantee, but I doubt we're going to see anything early.
But at first, there seemed to be no bad blood. Keywords are seemed to be. The first 2 periods were oddly quiet, with teams focusing more on the score sheet rather than on each other. There were a few penalties, but none of them seemed malicious. It was mainly just Mike Fisher being careless. The third period, however, ended up being a different story. The Flyers would extend their lead over Ottawa, but the penalty minutes started to rack up. Alexei Zamenhof, after just scoring a few minutes before, would get assessed a roughing penalty alongside Daniel Alfredsson. 3 minutes later, Smolinski and Mark Gregg would also get sent to the box, and Todd Simpson would slash Michael Handzus. A Flyer getting slashed for the second time in a row. They get a power play, but then felt too powerful because 6 men would be on the ice, not including the goalie of course, so their power play would come to an abrupt end. So far, this seemed mild compared to what was being spewed in Philly. Revenge was the theme, but it felt as if they only meant offensively. With 1:45 left in the game, Flyers' Donald Brashear would begin to instigate, hitting an opposing senator, but that senator was none other than one of the scariest heavyweights in NHL history, Rob Ray. You don't step up to Ray without facing some type of retaliation. This is when all hell broke loose.
And Brashear, and finally they dropped him. The penalty call was on the way in the first place.
And Simpson just went in after Brashear, and now he's pounding away.
Rivalries are iconic, but nothing solidifies one more than when the goaltenders drop the gloves. The Avs and Red Wings saw goalies face off. The Battle of Alberta saw goalies who used to be on the opposing teams drop the gloves. It's sort of a rite of passage. And well, that night, Sens Patrick Lalime and Flyers Robert Esch would go at it.
Everybody can get a hold of. Here goes Patty Lalime.
Esch comes in, so Lalime comes down ice. Lalime gets the sweater over top of the head of Esch, but he falls down. Now Esch tries to get another hand over the top.
This might be what the Senators needed.
The two would receive penalties for both leaving the crease and for fighting, and the game had to reset with 2 new goalies in net. Just 3 seconds after the face-off, the riot would continue.
And we'll see what, if anything, happens. And here's Neal right in front, and here we go again. And oh, Neal drops. I don't like Tamander's chances here. He better just cover up here because he is going to get tagged bad. And Tamander is looking for help.
Another reset had to be implemented due to the Chara ejection, which, by the way, Flyers management wasn't happy about. Not because Chara got ejected, but due to the Sens picking on players Bobby Clarke deemed, quote, unable to defend themselves. After the puck dropped for a 3rd time, fans in attendance would boo the players because they didn't immediately drop the gloves again. You can't make that up.
Off the draw, Recchi wins it. Puck floats back to the corner, and here's Kapanen back to get it.
However, Mark Recchi made their wish come true.
Clears the puck ahead. Recchi comes across, and now we're going to get one going here. Redden and LeClaire.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
Oh, and Spezza lands 2 good rights.
It's kinda ironic that the final fight of the game would feature the player who unexpectedly accumulated the most penalty minutes that night. You'd think the enforcers would face more retaliation, like Brashear, who led all Flyers in penalty minutes. But it was Jason Spezza who finished the night, leading both the Senators and the entire game with 35 penalty minutes. And out of everyone who got involved in the scrap, only 1 player would face a suspension. Take a guess as to who. It was Danny Markov, and it wasn't entirely due to the fight either. He'd get a game misconduct, but because it was his 3rd game misconduct of the season, he'd receive a 1-game ban. The aftermath of the brawl was just as bizarre as the game itself. Furious over what he deemed unfair matchups, Bob Clarke attempted to confront Senators coach Jacques Martin in the locker room. He'd get held back, of course, but insisted that he was never going to physically hurt Martin. The league would go into a lockout the following year, but it allowed them time to sit down and address the current state of the game. Just 3 days before the Flyers-Senators brawl, Todd Bertuzzi would maliciously retaliate against Steve Moore, sucker punching him to the ice, ending his career. Having 2 instances of extreme retaliation in the span of a week was not a good look, and many questioned whether the league was turning too violent. So when the NHL would return in the 05-06 season, they implemented several new rules that would be monumental in changing the game. One of those rules included giving any player a 1-game suspension if they instigate a fight within the final 5 minutes of a game, pretty much saying, don't do what Philly just did. The 2 teams would meet one final time that season, but both sides were no longer focused on the beef. Instead, they'd focus on the crucial 2 points for playoff seeding. The Flyers would make it to that year's Eastern Conference Final, but would fall just short of their ultimate goal, losing to the eventual Cup champs, the Tampa Bay Lightning. To this day, the Brawl holds the record for the most penalty minutes in a single game, and by a landslide too, as the most recent game to even come remotely close was one between the Penguins and Islanders in 2011, where both teams would accumulate 346 penalty minutes. The intensity and overall absurdity alone was enough to draw me into making this video, and it was also the hype and the media attention that drew thousands of fans to that night's game. Whether you agree with it or not, fighting as hockey is how rivalries grow and how hatred brews, and every now and then it allows teams to make history, changing the game along the way.